Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Click Gaming's weekly podcast. Evan here, and over with the big beard is Chance. We're kind of scrambling for something to talk about, but we figured something out. Chance came up with a great idea.
We're always scrambling for something to talk about.
There's plenty of things to talk about, but are we experts on them or good enough to give our opinion? Yes.
Or can we BS about it for at least 25 minutes?
True. But anyways, we're going to talk about how Microsoft bought Bethesda and kind of why they bought it, I'd say. Kind of the long term, what their goal is. And maybe some other companies that are going to be looking into competing with that are already competing with that. So Microsoft bought Bethesda for $7.5 billion. Short, chump change. And that includes several software companies, Machine Games, ID Software, Arcane Studios, Alpha Dog Games, Tango Gameworks, and I'm sure a lot of you probably don't know those names all that much. ZeniMax Online Studios, but
So is Bethesda just a holding company for all these companies?
Yes. And they were a publisher as well, I believe. So like Bethesda worked with Elder Scrolls, which is a big deal. That's a very deep storyline and just game series. Wolfenstein, Fallout is a deep series as well. Other games like Pirates of the Caribbean, Star Trek, Terminator, just a bunch of games. And not too long ago, Microsoft started, what is it called, Gamepass? And for those that don't know about Gamepass, it started in 2017, so 3 years ago. For $10 a month, you can have access to their entire library of games. And so they have like a bunch of games, they're adding those games. So my theory is that Microsoft, or I say my theory, a lot of people's theories are that Microsoft bought Bethesda to have access to those games to encourage people to buy more Game Pass because they want monthly money coming in. Kind of like how they switched Windows to monthly licenses, right, Chance? They switched to monthly licenses for...
Not for Windows. Microsoft Office.
Office, okay.
365, and that's a monthly / yearly subscription. Windows is still a paper license for regular users.
Your base...
Enterprise is a different story, but regular users are still monthly, or it's still just a buy once, cry once type thing.
So with Office 360, I guess the studio, they wanted monthly money coming in. Monthly money is a lot better than one time buy, cry, whatever you said.
Cry once, buy once, cry once.
So monthly money is a little bit better than that. Less noticeable. Not as much money.
I mean, all software is going to monthly just because the big thing with monthly is you have recurring revenue. If you go one-off purchases, like it was a big deal prior, but you have to release enough new features to make somebody want to pony up again and buy the new version. So Microsoft kind of ran the deal, and most companies, Adobe's been subscription for a little while for the same reasons of like there for a while, like computers and software was advancing fast enough that like it made sense that you wanted to buy, you bought Microsoft Office 2003, 2007 or 8 came along, like you're going to want to buy 2007, 2008 time frame, and then 2014, 2015 came around, like you're going to want to buy that. But then like we've kind of hit a plateau, and Adobe was the same way. Is like they started seeing a bunch of people just hanging out on like Adobe 11, 12, 13. Because like, well, I have basically everything I need, right, in the software. It does what I need, so there's no reason for me to pony up and pay another $1,000, $2,000 to Adobe to get another set of licenses, right? Microsoft same way, right? So Office finally hit a point of like, like why do I need newer Office? Like this does everything I need to do. And especially now that Windows 10 is supposed to be the end all be all of Windows, like they're not even going to have like compatibility as a reason. So some people would buy newer versions of software because I'm running a newer operating system. The old version no longer works on a new version, so I have to have the newer version for my operating system to work, right? Um, but anyway, so a combination of the fact that we're not supposed to have any new operating systems and you have to release enough new features makes somebody want to buy a new one. So subscription makes sense because that very reason of like you no longer have to release a good product. And you can release updates that could be broken, right? You're not on the hook for a good product once every couple of years that you have to convince people to buy. You just have to convince them to sign up for your monthly payment, and then they're hooked.
But I guess video games are going to be going to that, or at least a portion of them.
They'll all go to that eventually. I'm assuming. I mean, video games might be slightly different because each time they develop a new game, that's a reason to buy the new game. Because they have like recreate everything a lot. I could see Call of Duty going to that because they kind of release a new Call of Duty every so often. So like it makes sense for that. But like your one-off games are probably going to still just be one-off purchases because like the new version of the new game, is the reason to buy the new game, right? You don't have the problem of like we have to release enough new features to make somebody want to buy the new version. It's just release a new game and it's completely new. Um, but anything that hangs around for a while, probably go to that just because it's nice on their side. They have like set revenues that'll come in approximately, which is nice for the business side to keep stable, like because you have to hire people, you have to pay bills, salary and stuff. So that's nice on that side. But like the one-off games are probably still be one-off purchases unless you get into like the game passes and stuff where everybody gets 50 cents a month or something, and then you just kind of like deal with it.
50 cents per person or whatever, or per subscription.
Right.
Not just like 50 cents a month for the whole month for everybody that plays it.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to get like 25 cents, 50 cents a month or something off of it, right? Because you think about Game Pass, maybe all the games you download get a portion of your $10, $15, $20 a month. Even if $50 a month, right? You have 10 games downloaded, that's $5 a person or $5 a game per month, right? And then you like have to go through the process of like how do you divvy it up? Of like this game is way more complex than that game. So like, is it like do we divvy it up differently and stuff? Right? Like
they played more hours on this one though.
Maybe you do it by hours, right? Like I don't know what the answer is, but like somehow you have to divvy it up and say like, hey, out of the $20 a month we get, this is fair to pay to each person. So like, and that's probably why. See, Microsoft's in a weird spot. Some companies are in a weird spot. Microsoft's in a weird spot, and it's probably why they're kind of grasping for straws at this point. Google's not in the weird spot Microsoft's in, but they also have a pile of money. So Microsoft has a pile of money. Google has a pile of money. Apple has a pile of money. A handful of these companies have a big pile of money. And instead of like innovate and like actually make products in-house, they basically can't. So like big corporations are notoriously bad for being able to produce new products in-house. So kind of the strategy has been for the last maybe 12, 14 years is just buy startups. So like whenever a startup gets to a point of like, oh, this looks promising, just buy it. And then you can take it over and run it however you want to run it. But yeah, so because they can't innovate in-house, they start buying stuff. And so Microsoft's kind of grasping at straws because they don't really have a solid revenue base at this point. Their Windows users are like going away. Like they've had weird licensing stuff with new Windows 10 stuff. Windows 10 is supposed to be the last operating system. So once you buy it for a computer, you never have to buy it again. So like there's not this every couple of years you get a new set of Windows licenses. Businesses are kind of a different story, but basically they don't have any major revenue coming in other than Office products and some like enterprise stuff that they do. I say some enterprise stuff. They do a ton of enterprise stuff, but like they don't have that huge amount of revenue coming in from Windows, which historically has been a big chunk of their revenue is Windows licenses. So it leaves them a predicament of like how do we make money, and so that's why they've kind of gone down the advertising boat recently. They're trying to push more Bing users. They're trying to push more like different things to make money selling your data type stuff, um, other than selling my Windows licenses. So it's kind of why they're integrating more with cloud. They're trying to push OneDrive. They're trying to push Office 365. All these products that are subscription based or
Microsoft Team.
team. I mean, that's on the enterprise side, but yeah, I mean, all this stuff that's like subscription based that they can bring revenue in that's not from Windows, so they can keep supporting Windows and developing Windows, but have revenue coming in.
Well, I mean, for an end user, I mean, I don't enjoy paying monthly, but at the same time, like it's an automatic withdrawal. Like you just stop noticing it. Your average person will stop noticing it. So like, is it good in the long run?
For the end user, no. For the company that's doing it, yes.
Because I mean, you might end up paying. Because like, I don't know, you're buying games that you don't necessarily use, but maybe you get more involved into those games now because you have them or have access to them. So maybe it's good for developers to get their game recognized. Especially if you're a smaller game. But if you're like a large AAA title, like there's not really a point. You're already discovered like clips and stuff, and like people having fun are going to grow your game more than being on a Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah, and we'll see what wins. I mean, the convenience factor is definitely a big deal. So, like, same way with Netflix, same way with Spotify, same way with all these other platforms. Title. Anyway, basically, name a platform that gives you full access to a library of things. It comes down to convenience, right? It's like it's a big selling point is like you don't have to pony up big amounts of money and you don't have to make decisions. So like it takes away the decision of what game to buy, and it takes away the like, oh, I got to pony up $80, $100 for the game when I could just pay $15 monthly or whatever, right? So like it's definitely a convenience factor it adds in. I mean, I'm sure the subscription will win because like the convenience factor will outweigh like the negatives, but we'll see.
Well, Amazon is starting to get into. I get emails all the time from Amazon saying, "Hey, try Amazon Gaming or Amazon Games." I don't even know if they have any good titles on there. I kind of just ignore it because I mainly just play Call of Duty.
Right. I mean, it's just
Prime Gaming is the right. Sorry.
at this point, it's just everybody grasping for the next big thing, right? All these big companies that just have bukus of cash laying around, they're just trying to figure out what they can do to spend the money. Basically, it's like, hey, we have tens of billions of dollars to blow. What can we blow it on, right? So they have all these pet projects, and like they're just going to start trying stuff. Let's buy some companies. Let's freaking try new stuff. Like we got tens of billions of dollars to throw at stuff. Like let's throw it at the wall and see what sticks, right? Because what do they, maybe they land on the next big thing and they bring in hundreds of billions of dollars from it. They poured 10 billion in, they brought in 500 billion. So they're all just grasping at straws, trying to be the basically leading dog in the pack, right? They're trying to win that market share on all these emerging markets. And when you have that much cash, you can basically play the lottery on every market imaginable.
It seems like Amazon. Let's see, and mainly looks like they're just doing like loot, like drops and stuff. Like, oh, you have Prime, so you get this exclusive skin, kind of stuff. Does it look like there's any games really? But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon does add games. I mean, they might have games, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they're adding things all the time to Amazon.
Yeah,
Just your
Amazon's
Prime
problem is they don't really have a platform, right? They don't control a major gaming platform. So like, what do? Compete with Steam? Like they don't control a major gaming platform. Whereas Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, these people that actually control a major gaming platform, they have a little different. I don't know. They're just in a much different situation than like somebody say Amazon is in, trying to do game libraries because what are you going to do with the Amazon game library, right? What are you going to play that on? So PC is the only option, right? So still competing with Steam at that point.
Yeah, it says Prime Gaming includes a free monthly Twitch Prime sub or Twitch channel subscription, tons of free content in your favorite gaming or favorite games, and 5+ free PC games every month and more with your Amazon Prime subscription.
Okay, so there's PC games.
Yeah, 5 free ones.
I was thinking maybe they could do something with their Fire tablets and like some of that type of stuff, but like because they have the Fire Stick, right? Like they could do some basic stuff with some of that. And maybe that is their end goal, is to do something along the lines of their Fire Stick or Fire tablets or something. But I mean, they're competing with Steam at this point. Like, I don't know. They could win.
It's Amazon. They could probably buy Steam.
Maybe. Valve's pretty big.
But I mean, gaming. I mean, Google, as their impact on it is what they have the Stadia, and I know they're struggling to add games to it. And I mean,
Yeah,
obviously,
Google's
I
trying to
guess
push Stadia.
Microsoft. I mean, of course, like I said, Microsoft it's still struggling to add some games. A lot of their games they've added are old.
You convince a freaking game development company that usually gets 20, 30, 50, $100 for a game to now get 50 cents a month.
Per user, yeah.
Yeah, instead of selling a new $60 game every 2 years. That sounds like a lot less money coming in. You sell that, buddy. Here, you're going to get $6 a year instead of $40 a year. Sound great, right?
No.
Cool. That's why they're having issues. That's why they're buy companies and like doing stuff in house to make it happen. Just because it's the same like the movie industry. They were hardcore against it until Netflix finally like they didn't have an option, right? Netflix won, so they didn't have an option, so they had to bow down to Netflix. But like same story. Like these game companies are gonna hold out as long as possible, and then once they finally lose, then they'll concede, or if they win, then they win, right?
Well, how Netflix won, I guess, is kind of what you're saying is how you're thinking the subscriptions will win. Is eventually their library gets big enough that you're like, well, I'm just happy with my subscription. I'm not going to buy any more
Consumers that I'm not
games.
watching anything other than what's on Netflix, right?
They
We
cancel their
eventually got
cable.
to a point where like there was enough people that only watch Netflix stuff that like you had to be on Netflix, otherwise your stuff wasn't going to be watched. And so, I mean, there's still companies fighting it. Like there's still programs that go on and off Netflix and stuff. Like as contracts come in and end, and like weird cable stuff that's historical stuff that's not gone yet. But like ultimately at this point, if your stuff's not on Netflix, I mean Hulu's kind of trying to help, but like basically if your stuff's not on Netflix, it's not getting watched. And so like they control the
market.
English is hard. Attention. They control the attention, right? They have the attention. Like nobody else can get any of the attention because they control it. So like they won. So they can say, hey, do you want to be watched or not? We'll give you however much they pay somebody, right? Pennies on a dollar compared to what they were making. But you're getting the pennies on a dollar instead of zero.
Or very, very, very few.
So if libraries like game library subscriptions or whatever take off, it'll be the same story. I don't know if it'll ever take off in that fashion, just because there's so many different platforms. So like Netflix was platform agnostic, so it really helped out with Netflix taking off as like your phone, iPod, iPhone, tablet, computer, name a device, and it's got Netflix
TV.
on it, right?
Yeah.
Like name a device got Netflix on it at this point, probably. Like your toaster, like God only knows what Netflix is installed on. So like they control it. But like with all the different game consoles, Microsoft's gonna fight for their thing, and Sony's gonna fight for their thing, and Google's gonna fight for their thing, and Nvidia's gonna do their thing, and and then you have your PC people that are doing their own thing, right? Everybody's doing kind of their own thing. It's just gonna be a lot harder for somebody to come in there and actually win, which is kind of why Steam and Valve, like, they control the PC market, right? And
for the most part, yeah.
They control. I mean, for the most part, they control it. Everybody else that's not on Steam is just one-off companies that are big enough that they can tell Steam to hop in a lake and they'll be fine for now. But if somebody came out with something like, say, Steam or Valve come out with Steam 2.0 and that worked with Xboxes, PlayStations, and make up Nintendo, like Nintendo's never doing anything with anybody else, so never mind. Just stick with Xbox and PlayStation, right? Maybe Steam comes out with Xbox and PlayStation, and now Steam controls Xbox, PlayStation, and computer. Now Steam would be in a position to be like, all right, subscription, you're either on board or not. They could actually do that. But like with how split apart the market is, I don't know if it's ever going to happen until somebody comes in there with like uh, a common game pass, common game library that you can do that with.
Well, especially now with cross-platform, I wouldn't say it's more split. I mean, I'd say it's less split because you're having your Xbox people play with your PS4 or your PlayStation people, but at the same time, like, I'm going to play on what I'm comfortable with now. Other people would buy, it sounds ridiculous, but they'd buy two. They'd buy a PlayStation, and they'd buy a Xbox. And they play both. When their Xbox friends were on, they'd play on their Xbox. But now they have cross-platform. What's going on? You just play with whatever, and you just hop in Discord and talk with them. So I don't know where I was really going with that, but that split, like I said, I don't know if cross-platform helps or hurts that split.
I don't think it really matters a lot for the split because the split's more along the lines of where you buy your games, not necessarily who you play with. So like the fact you're buying one copy of the game versus two, like no big deal. Now, if you could play on everything, right, you could buy Game Pass and play on everything. See, that's what I'm getting at is like you're going to have to buy. Currently, my idea is you're going to have to buy the Microsoft version, you're going to have to buy the Sony version, and you're going to have to buy the Google version or something, right? PC version, Steam, whatever it is, whoever wins on the PC side. But you have to buy 3 different versions. So it's highly unlikely that any one of the 3 get enough traction to be able to say like we're now subscription based, like, and all these AAA titles just be fine with it. I don't think any one of the 3 can get enough market share to make a AAA title be like, all right, we're in because we want people to play our game. So, because I don't think they're going to actually, because that gets back to the point of like Netflix gained enough traction that they could say like, you're either join the party or you're not. Like, you can hop on the boat or we're leaving. I don't think a single platform is going to be able to do that as long as they're segregated. So as long as Microsoft's fighting for Microsoft and Sony's fighting for Sony and whoever, Valve, Steam, whatever, is fighting for PC, I don't think you're ever going to get a common game library until you get somebody that comes in that works for all 3. But I don't know if you're going to be able to get somebody that works for all 3 because like Microsoft's going to fight for their stuff, right? So like
your best bet, I guess now.
I think it's so segregated that you're never going to get there, at least with how things are currently structured.
I feel like you'd have to start on PC, get big enough, and then go to PlayStation because PlayStation doesn't have a subscription based right now. Obviously, you couldn't go to Microsoft and say, "Hey, I want to offer you a subscription based product," because they already have their own. So your best bet would be
you just got to be big enough and have enough people following you that it makes sense for them to do it, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You get big enough on PC and PlayStation, and then you go to Microsoft. Like exactly, I feel like PlayStation is more likely to say yes because they don't have their own.
Maybe.
Does that make sense?
Maybe, but they also may say yes and saying we'll only do it if you don't let Microsoft do it, right? Like that's been a thing historically of like we'll be on board, but you can't get those guys on board, right? That's a historical thing that Microsoft and Sony have done despite each other for the game consoles. So like, I don't think with the current market structure, like it's going to happen. I think it's going to be a pipe dream, and Microsoft's going to pour a lot of money into it. It's never going to happen. The one caveat to that may be Stadia. So if Google can actually get people to play on Stadia, which it's got its flaws, it's good and bad. Like they've got a lot of work to do to make it actually really a thing. But if they can ever make that happen to where it's good enough to play on Stadia and you don't need your own device, then they won the game, right? Because then you're never going to buy another PlayStation, Xbox, computer, anything. You're never going to buy another anything. You're just going to play on their streaming service, right? So, like that's the ultimate like trump card essentially is that Stadia takes over because then you're never going to buy another console. So that's the ultimate trump card to actually win the game library game is to win the freaking console game, and the only way to win the console game globally is something like Stadia.
And why do you say Stadia? Because there's no console, or there's
Correct.
not really a
Correct,
device?
because you buy a $50 device and you can play on their thing, and you update your device every 10 years versus updating it every 2 or something when the new stupid console comes out, right? So that's the deal. Is like, the idea is you buy a $50 thing, and maybe even update it every 3 or 4 years, but it's $50 every 3 or 4 years with a subscription instead of $300, $400, $500, $600 every couple of years, and still have to buy the game.
Or game or subscription.
Right. So the idea is the fact that you pay like it's a lot cheaper, right? This is the idea, and you can play on nicer hardware. So like maybe
because it's not having on location. All your device does is basically forward your controller input or your mouse and keyboard input to their server, right?
Right. All the rendering is done on their side, and it's just shipped back and forth. So maybe if Google Stadia is equivalent of like, or I think they have packages, right? So they have like a couple packages like 1080p, 1440, maybe 4K gaming or whatever, right? So say like 1080p is like you built a 2070 computer with a 2070 in 2020, right? Maybe that's their low end, and then their next step up is you build it with a 3070, and their super top end is a 3090, right? So instead of having to shell out the $3,000 or whatever for the 3090, you can just pay them $20 a month, $30 a month, and you get 3090 performance for that $20-$30 a month, which comes out cheaper for you in the long run, right? And you don't have to worry about when the 4090 comes out. If the 4090 comes out, you literally just keep paying your same amount of money, and you get 4090 performance, right? And you don't have to keep upping your equipment every time and worrying about like compatibility and some of that stuff. Like, do I buy now? Do I buy later? It's just so much more convenient, and it's cheaper for you in the long run. So like, if they can get something, or it may not be Stadia, maybe some other company that takes over, but like something along the lines of Stadia, that principle, if they can actually take over the market with that, then they won. Then they're going to be in the same spot Netflix was, says you're either you can join our party or you can freeze outside, basically. Yeah, you're either in or out. So,
well, at that point, your exclusives don't matter, because like that's the big.
No, because you have one platform, right? That's the idea.
The big debate now is you have the two things of the reason why you buy one versus the other is your controller. One, your controller, and two, your friends, and three, exclusives. I said two. Did I say two reasons? Those are your three reasons.
Right.
Your exclusives, I mean, Xbox has Halo. I don't really know what all other ones they have. I don't really play exclusives, but the big one for Sony is Spider-Man. And that's a very popular game. But those will cease to exist. I mean, they won't cease to exist. They'll exist, but they'll just be on the Stadia platform.
They'll be exclusive, and everybody will be on the same thing, right?
So it wouldn't be called an exclusive anymore because it's on the only one console. There's only one console or one device,
right?
And everything's on it.
You'll still have people playing on PC. Like, you'll still have some other fringe stuff that sticks around, but like for the majority of people, especially if you can buy like 3 or 4 of them and have like one in your bedroom and one in your living room and one in like your son's room or something, or your kid's room or whatever, right? Like you got a game room or something, maybe like a man cave. You buy 3, 4, 5 of these consoles, and you have your whole house full of them. You just sit down and one of them start playing instead of like, oh, you buy.
You probably have one subscription.
One subscription, right? You just sit down on whatever one you want to play, and you play that. All your saved games are still there. Like you don't have to worry about like all of that. So it's like You just sit down on whichever one you want to play at, and you can play. So like, it's way more convenient. And like I say, you
But
would
you're just
never buy.
limited on right now. We're limited on our internet.
You're right, but you would never buy 7 consoles, one for every room, right? But like, if it's $50 for the device, like, yeah, buy one for every room.
Yeah, you would never buy 7 consoles or 7
Unless
computers.
you're crazy and running an esports production facility.
Yeah, but you would never do that. No one would ever do that.
Your average person.
Your average person, 100% would not do that. No, they might own 2, or maybe 3
2 I
might be
could
a stretch.
see, like living room and maybe a
3 would
game
be a
room or
stretch.
something. But like,
Or
you're
your
not gonna
kid
go
has
buy
one and you have one.
17, right?
Yeah, I mean,
But anyway, that opens up the door to buy 17 or whatever if you do a streaming version. So anyway,
and
there's
then make things a lot easier on our end.
so yeah, and, there's just a lot of reasons to go to it. But the technology is the issue, and yeah, it's really an internet problem, kind of. It's also a problem of just how we've kind of built our infrastructure. Our internet infrastructure is centered around data centers, and data centers are like, let's build this huge thing called a data center and have like 12 of them
It's
across
really
the
far
country.
away.
I have 12 of them across the country, and it doesn't really work for like anything that's low latency sensitive, because just the requirements for shipping the data across the country. Like if we have to hit Iowa, like that's going to take a while. So like the better idea is we're in Oklahoma City, we hit Oklahoma City, or we're in Dallas, we hit Dallas, we're in Atlanta, we hit Atlanta, right? But it's not how the internet was built. We built huge like huge internet highways basically to data centers, and we built huge data centers. So the latency is the issue, right? And so latency is only going to be good if you're basically co-located with the data center. So just the way we've currently built the infrastructure, it's just not really set up for it. Google is probably in the best spot out of anybody else to be set up for it, but they're still not really set up for it, right? You basically need like on like every city,
Top
town,
50 cities, every top 50, like the top 50 cities.
like every city, dude, like every city and town need a data center in them. Basically, is where you're at with starting to do like Stadia type stuff. Is every city and town needs a small scale data center to be able to support it.
Or maybe you just get rid of the large ones and you just move towards smaller ones. But obviously, that takes a lot of work.
A lot of work and a lot of money. They sunk in a lot of money in these big data centers, right? Like, and like your maintenance cost goes up because like it's remote, so like you have to like send people out to maintain them. Like, you add a lot more complexity when you do a bunch of smaller data centers than when you have huge large data centers. The software side is also not caught up. Like, it would be very hard to build a ton of small data centers. We have some companies that are starting to do something along those lines, but like it's pretty rare, and most software hasn't caught up to be able to handle that. I mean, very, very few. I say very, very few. A very small subset of software that you interact with can even span data centers. So like most software that you interact with doesn't even span like 2 data centers. Like it's just on one data center, and then they have like a backup that's a backup copy on the other data center, and they have like a switch they can fail over to, but like primary failover type stuff, not like, oh, let's run on 7 data centers at once. So it's very few companies are set up. There are very few software creations at all are set up to run on multiple data centers. So
I mean, even like you have like Rocket League and like video game wise, like some of them are on multiple ones, or
right,
most of them are on
but
multiple ones. But
you point to a specific data center when you load in, right? Like you point to east or west, and like it's only one data center on east or one data center on west, right? Like you're not spanning data centers because some pieces span the data centers, like your account spans data centers, but like the software itself doesn't span data centers. Like you
I'm
can't
not
connect
pinging east and pinging west
right.
in one game.
Right. The 4 people in your lobby, 2 of them can't be on east, one of them be on west, and one of them be on Europe, right? Like they all have to be pointing towards east or west or Europe, or they all have to be pointing towards the same data center. So like most software is that case of like you're at one data center. And so spanning out to hundreds or thousands of data centers is not really something we've architected in our current software. It'll be in the future. Like I said, there are some companies that are kind of moving towards that, but it's just really not a thing that's been super well designed and developed historically.
Well,
So there's a lot of work before we get to thousands of data centers.
and that's why people complain about lag, is because you're hitting the wrong data center.
Right, or the data center too far away, right? You're in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, right? The data center is crazy far away compared to what, if you're in Iowa with the Iowa server or whatever, right? So just kind of how it works.
Well, how long do you think for Stadia to actually take? Like, if they keep pouring money into it, obviously pouring money into it will speed it up, but you can't go any faster than the current software. How long do you think till Stadia or another company can spin up and actually be a serious competitor?
Here's the deal. If another company comes in, Google's going to buy them up. I guarantee they give any other company that starts to make a wave, I guarantee they give them like enough money just to go off and leave and stop.
And they just have their software and their developments.
Right. They just say, hey, we'll give you $20 billion to just go live on an island and never talk to anybody else ever again, right? When you have that kind of money, you can just say like, hey, we're going to give you this and you're going to go away and you're never going to talk to anybody else ever again.
Or work for us, yeah, basically.
And they're going to say, we're taking your software for this amount of money. You can take it or leave it and you can go away. You can never do this stuff again, right? Like, so if another company starts taking off, Google will buy them out, Amazon will buy them out, Microsoft will buy them out, somebody will buy them out. If another company like starts to make real headway, unless you're like a Elon Musk type person. I don't even know if an Elon Musk type person. Maybe Elon Musk is the wrong person, but maybe Zuckerberg or somebody that's really keen on like, no, I'm changing the world. You can go hop in a lake. Jeff Bezos maybe would be a better example because Musk technically sold out for PayPal. Maybe he's not the biggest example, but you'd have to have somebody that's really like in it
your
for
wallet has to be big enough you can tell the other person to
not necessarily wallet, but your cojones have to be big enough that you're going to tell Microsoft to go hop in a lake. You got to think
and turn down $20 million for no more work.
You got to think Google says here's $20 billion to go away. You're like, you got a pretty big cojones to say no. I'm going to beat you, right? Because like you're way smaller than they are. You're competing with huge companies, and so basically, it's how big your cojones are. And if you actually care about making an impact to the world, or if you just want to make some money, right? Because your legacy, right? That becomes a question of legacy. Is the $20 billion, $30 billion, $100 billion Google's going to give you worth it versus I could leave the legacy of starting the new, stream video game stuff, right? Like,
so do you think 10 years?
I think it could be 20. It could be 5. It'll take a catalyst, right? It'll take some big catalyst of like either some. I don't know if Google can do it, just because big companies historically, like Google's been one of the weirder ones of like they've been able to innovate quite a bit, but like historically most big companies don't innovate super well. So it takes like some small startup company type thing to really compete and like move the market, at least start the movement. And so like it depends on when somebody comes around and does it, right? Like whenever some random person, the next Jeff Bezos comes around and decides I'm doing this, right? And they do it, right? If they come around next year, it'll be 5 years. If it takes them 20 years to come around, then it'll be 25 years, right? Like it kind of depends on when that. I don't think there's really a way to guess a time frame at this point. It's just kind of when that person comes around to really drive it and make it happen. Because like you got to think it's gonna be an interesting thing to make happen. Basically, what they're gonna have to do is go build out the software infrastructure and the physical hardware infrastructure to have small data centers that do the streaming locally, right? So like you got to go to AT&T and basically like I don't know, like all over the place at AT&T, like every network closet they have in the whole country, you need to have a set of servers sitting there running in that network closet. And so to get as close as possible to your users. And so building that out is going to take a lot of time and effort to make that happen. So like money's helpful for sure, but time and effort for sure to make that happen, to be able to, maybe AT&T is the right one, but like start out somewhere and be like, start building out your infrastructure. Be like, maybe you have a central data center to do some stuff, but like most of your stuff's gonna have to be edge. If we call it edge devices, kind of the newer term in the IT industry is edge devices or edge computing. Basically, you're living on the edge of the network instead of the center of the network, and so that you have to deploy devices everywhere. Like in Oklahoma City alone, you're probably going to have 30, 40, 50 data centers just to handle Oklahoma City. And that's not counting like all your smaller towns and stuff all over the place. So like it's going to take a lot of work to make that happen. And so it just depends on kind of when it happens, because Google's going to stay on the side of like, we want to live in our data centers. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Google is doing, but like it would
Typically
typically
they're in
they
their
typically they're not
home
going to be able
box.
to do there. Typically they're not going to be able to make it happen, just historically. So maybe they'll pull a rabbit out of the hat and make it happen, but I think it's going to be some startup somewhere that makes it happen, and they're going to just, like I say, have to go through the process of every freaking city setting up 20, 30, 40 quote unquote tiny data centers to make it happen, to get the latency down far enough where it's usable.
Well, I think a good average would be 8 to 9 years. And obviously I'm not as knowledgeable on like the type of technology it takes, but I think if they continue to pour money into it, um 8 to 9 years is probably a decent time frame. Um
Yeah, I'll
Maybe
tell
by
you.
then we'll take the Stadia, we like reverse engineer it or whatever, and then try to come out with their own to compete with it, and then they'll just get bought.
Yeah. I think the smartest move would be, so internet is the thing, right? We do a
Yes.
lot to we have a lot of things we've developed to ship less data around the internet and to get it closer to users. Typically those are called CDNs, or content delivery networks. A lot of times when you're hitting a website, most of the images, sometimes even like the JavaScript and CSS, HTML even sometimes, is cached on one of these CDNs. And so basically when you hit the website, you hit the closest local copy to you that you can. Um, and basically what that boils down to is companies like Cloudflare and a few of the other bigger CDNs have servers everywhere, and people just pay them storage fees of like, hey, we want to host XYZ data on your servers, and we want to spread out, all over the globe. And then when somebody accesses your site, you hit the Oklahoma City version, right? If you're in Oklahoma City, you hit the Oklahoma City version, and so your latency is a lot slower and your load times are a lot quicker. So most big sites are like that. It's kind of a mess, but that's kind of how we do a lot of images. Images are the big thing because images are huge and expensive to ship around. But like videos, also a thing. Game libraries are a thing. Game downloads. Basically, anything that's very large is typically delivered by a content delivery network, and so there's just spread it all over the globe, right? They'll release it on the content delivery network, and then basically open the floodgates up to people to access it on that content delivery network. So probably the most interesting way to deploy it would be is to have a content delivery network that you built out, and then slowly start adding these gaming servers to your content delivery network. So like maybe you go build out 5 or 6 edge network content delivery networks in Oklahoma City and all these other cities. Maybe that's how you build out your initial like infrastructure for your data centers, to have like edge data centers actually closer to users. And then you come back after you've kind of got that infrastructure built out, and then you add in the rendering farms to handle the games. I don't know, just my 2 cents of like a good way to approach it without having to have just bukus of money and time. So you could start out with the content delivery network, which we've kind of already decided is like we kind of already have the technology to do it, and it's already been done a couple times. So like that'd be a good way to start. And then once you already have kind of locations established and all the contracts in place with all the different ISPs and facilities and local building maintenance on the servers, all that fun stuff. Once you kind of get all that lined out, it's just another step to start adding in rendering computers, right? Rendering servers to be able to play the games. And then your next step is to really freaking push it and try to get people playing it. Because like if you could get, we've got AT&T fiber. If you get into Rack 59, you're talking 10, 12 milliseconds latency. Like that's a frame. That's plenty playable for most games. Like
And most people.
right. So like most people's like should be fine with a frame or two of latency. And so especially most of your casual stuff, especially like if you're playing Spider-Man or you're playing like Wii Bowling
Among
or
Us.
like Among Us, like most like probably 80, I don't know about 80% is a good, but maybe 80% of the time that people are playing games on consoles, it's probably fine for.
Well, I mean, Among Us, like we normally play, like I average like 50 milliseconds of ping.
Right.
Like
That's still Among Us servers. I'm talking about 10 to 12 milliseconds of latency on like you click a button on the mouse and the game reacts, right? Like talking about Stadia type stuff, right? So like
well, I wonder what the average is on Parsec right now.
parsec depends on
for
what you're hitting.
like say we're
for
hitting
us, like 2 milliseconds. We're local, dude. It's like two milliseconds.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
But anyway, so that's the deal. Is you're gonna have to get down to that sub one frame, basically, of sub 13 milliseconds. If we'll probably stick 60 FPS is pretty good, so we'll probably stick to 60 FPS for a while. So like, if you get to sub one frame for latency, like you're fine for most games. But especially if you add a convenience factor, like maybe you're hardcore, like competitive people will stick out, but like most people will go to the freaking.
if you never tell them, they'll never know.
Some people will never know, right? But like, Google Stadia stuff is upwards of 20, 30 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds, depending on what you're doing. That's 3, 4 frames, 5 frames. Like, you start noticing that, So,
Well, if that's it, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Actually, we got a lot more in depth on things that I didn't think we were going to talk about, but that's perfect. That's what we're here for. But anyways,
point me in a direction I can talk for hours.
This has been Click Gaming's weekly podcast. Thank you, Chance. And I'm Evan. Check out the links below. Like, subscribe. Hit us up on, like I said, the social medias, and give us a shout saying that you were interested in whatever we were talking about. On any pod. I'm not saying. I'm saying
whatever
any
we
of
just talked about. Leave a comment.
I'm saying any of them. If you're like, hey, I listened, like I enjoyed your podcast. Like,
If you have ideas, give us
hit us
ideas
up.
too, because we literally spend 10 minutes before the podcast. Like, what do we want to talk about today? None of us know.
That's why we're so scatterbrained. But we'll see you next week, scatterbrained too. So, anyways, thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you next time.